It's really difficult for speakers, including myself and Salim and everybody else, to go through all that long list of technologies. So we may have to do what we did with IT. You know, IT and ICT pulled together a whole bunch of different technologies into one term. So I use the term NT to mean next technologies, so I don't have to repeat all this sort of stuff all the time. But all of these things are together in what Salim and others are talking about. So it's not just artificial intelligence. And there's three kinds of artificial intelligence, and I'll come back to that in a second. They get confused too often. So you take all of these things together, synthetic biology, genomics, as was mentioned, computational science or digital science, as was mentioned. By the way, the reason that's so important is the old way of doing science. You observed, you have a hypothesis, you design an experiment, you build the lab, you run the experiment, you get the research done, you write an article, you send it to a publisher, a journal, and you wait for a year to get it published. Then somebody else has got to duplicate that. That's pretty slow. Even though with that slow process, the scientific advances, obviously, in our lifetime has been extraordinary. But that's going to be nothing compared to computational science. Because in computational science, you do the simulation, and you can engage other people's computers around the world to speed it up, or you can get out of IBM now, the little quantum going on now. So we have tremendous capabilities to do thousands of experiments in a few minutes. So that long process I just said can be really crunched down to a small amount, which means that the science breakthroughs will happen far faster than we're willing to understand at this point. Now, as you know, in technology, you've got to have new scientific breakthroughs that you draw on to do the tech. Well, that means we're going to have a fabulously large reservoir coming up with this stuff. It's a big deal. I would say this is on par with Moore's Law, by the way, as an accelerator itself. So you got cloud computing, data analytics, artificial augmented reality, nanotech, two kinds. Right now we have big machines making little things. We do not have what Eric Drexler was talking about, atomically precise manufacturing, yet. But if we do, that's little things making little bigger things, making little bigger things, duplicating things like a plant. A plant is a nanotech thing for food, separating hydrogen and oxygen without heat, which we can't do yet. But if we get that ability going, that's a very big deal. Semantic web, tele-everybody, tele-everything. Quantum computing, you can now talk to IBM. I'm curious, how many people know this? People have been hearing about quantum computing for a long time, right? It's a big deal coming up. And we're talking about it way off in the distance. Well, there's only 5 qubits at the moment, so it's not a big deal in the public, but the public can now access that. You can contract with IBM to have cloud access for quantum computing today. It's mini, but it's there. It's beginning. And then you take quantum computing and you take artificial intelligence, and they reinforce each other and speed things up further. So telepresence, holographic communications, intelligence augmentation, I'll mention a little bit about this later, but if you can be augmented with a pair of glasses, I was not born with perfect eyesight. I see some others here are not as well. But now I'm okay. I am augmented, my brain, my seeing. What if we can do that with intelligence? What if eventually all people are able to augment their brain to be a genius? It's plausible. Collective intelligence is growing, blockchain is going, 3D, 4D printing of materials, biology. Saw the thing the other day about the heart, the first human miniature heart was just printed. Drones, driverless cars, autonomous vehicles, conscious technology. And the key thing here is the synergies among all these things. So when I say NT, I mean all those technologies and the synergies among them. That's the big underline. Because right now, we tend to think, of technologies one thing at a time. We even think of AI as one thing, which it's not. We have today narrow intelligence, right? I do some stuff in Korea, and you all know that AI beat the Go champion. And the Koreans were going nuts because they've been told through science fiction that when we have artificial intelligence, the game's over. So they're confusing narrow intelligence with super intelligence. And this conversation is getting a messy. So please, when you talk to your friends about artificial intelligence, make a distinction between three. Narrow is what we have now. It's one purpose. The AI that drives a car cannot diagnose cancer. And as a matter of fact, on the AlphaGo thing, if you change the rules from 19 to 19 grid to 20 by 20, it wouldn't work. General intelligence we don't have yet. Maybe the military does, I don't know. But at least in civilian, we don't have it. General intelligence is like us in the sense that we can adapt to a new situation, drawing on all of our experience, Googling, reading books. Artificial general intelligence will draw on the other narrow intelligences, sensor networks, data banks, all kinds of stuff, rewriting its code to solve a problem that we set. Superintelligence is that, except it sets its own goals. That's what science fiction is talking about. That's what Elon Musk is warning about. And the reason people are panicking now is because we don't know how long it'll take to go from general intelligence to super. It might take never. It might happen in the next moment. We have no idea. We don't know. By definition, as you said the other night, by definition, we won't know. Things would start to happen, and we will not understand why. Right? That'll be the first indication that it's moving. Now, if it's going to take 10 to 20 years to make international agreements on this sort of management of artificial general intelligence and make standards, just like International Atomic Energy Agency, right? We have rules, we have guidelines, we got all this sort of stuff, and we have the International Atomic Energy Agency. We got a system to manage it. It'll take us a long time to make this agreement. Putin said, whoever runs AI runs the world. China says it's in our 5-year plan, 2030, we're going to rule the world. Right? So the game is afoot. A lot of stuff is going on. And we're going to need guidelines. A lot of people understand this, but to make those guidelines and to make an agency or some system of governance is probably going to take 10 to 20 years. So if it's possible to have general in 10 to 20 years, then we've got to start panicking now. That's why these guys are giving you alerts, even though we're not there yet. But it's plausible that we could be there yet. So we should not wait until it happens, because if we do, all those comments about being treated as food or cockroaches and so forth is much more plausible. Okay, so this is the way we're thinking about technology, all linear, and they're not that way. All these things interact with each other. You know, your cell phone is a whole mess of things, right? It's these synergies where you can figure out things. One of the tricks of inventors is you make a matrix. You have a bunch of technologies down like this on one side, and then repeat the same ones right across the top. And you make like a little matrix. You say, how can technology 1 change technology 2? You fill out that little grid, and I guarantee you come up with ideas about technology you've never had. And we might miniaturize that thing down to a contact lens with zoom vision, augmented intelligence, and they may become fashion statements. So think of all these technologies like a Rubik's Cube that you can move and match, or braid them together. So we go from ICT to NT, just as information and communications technologies combines all that sort of stuff together in the synergies, so too we'll be doing that with technology. So what is possible, as has been clearly stated, is going to change dramatically. One, Moore's Law. But it's not only Moore's Law. It's also artificial intelligence, the acceleration going from narrow to general. As that happens, and people talk about the employment impacts of narrow, like the bus drivers being unemployed and so forth, you can sort of see that coming up and you can sort of prepare for it. But general is the hockey puck. That cuts across everything. And then you add to that the computational science that I mentioned. So you take these three plus the synergies of NT, those four things together are going to be driving an awful lot of change. So we got to get ready for the fourth revolution, or industrial revolution, and every element of technology, every element of business, every element of the sequence, from research to product evaluation, all of it goes to AI, speeds everything up. So one of the ways that we manage ourselves as a global think tank is, the history, of course, you're familiar with, is most of the management systems are hierarchical, up and down, information goes up and down. Networks cut across hierarchies to share, but they're like-minded people. So then when you integrate different networks of not like-minded people, then you get the synergies, you get the surprises, you get the new things. So then if you can take such nodes and make them connected into fields of play, and then connect those things up, that's how the think tank that I run is managed. I should have told you that earlier this evening. It might make it clearer, because we're not too easy to understand. We're just talking about how to work together. So inevitability of the next economics is very important for us to take seriously, because the concentration of wealth is increasing, income gaps are widening, employmentless economic growth seems to be the new norm, return on investment in capital and technology is usually better than labor, as was clearly pointed out in the talk before. Future technologies can replace most of human labor, so long-term structural unemployment is a surprise-free forecast. So what do we do about this? We studied everybody else's scenarios and research on this a couple of years ago, and made a list of questions that we thought were either badly answered or weren't asked. For example, not one study on the future of technology and employment mentioned synthetic biology once. Not one. I did a keyword search on all of them. Same thing, computational intelligence, not there. They're still talking about narrow. And they never made a distinction in general. I mean, there's a lot of bad research out. Anyway, so we put a lot of stuff together. We'll make a long story short. And one of the things we did is we ended up with 3 alternative scenarios to make the point that there's not a necessity to this sort of stuff. There's a lot of ways it can go. Organized crime, for example. Some people say that the Russian government and organized crime is a 60% overlap. Anybody from the organized crime here? Okay. Anyway, they can buy the best software talent money can buy. If you take all the organized crime together, cash-wise, you add it up, it's about $3-4 trillion. You take all the military budgets of the world, add them up, it's only about 1.6 trillion. Okay, so organized crime's got twice the money per year as the military. So they're going to play in this game too. That's scenario 2. Scenario 3, everything works great. This is where we anticipate this stuff, the general works well, we merge with superintelligence, and we have guaranteed income by about 2030. By the way, when we were doing these studies, the scenario writing, it was clear, how can you show that financial sustainability of guaranteed annual income? You know, because if all these people get unemployed in one kind of way of economics, and we use a guaranteed as a way to free up human potential to go all this, where's the financial sustainability? I could find no country that had a cash flow projection. I was in the Prime Minister's office twice in Finland where they're doing the experiment. Where's the cash flow projection? We'll give it to you next time. Come next time, where's the cash flow projection? Next time I got the Committee for the Future to say, tell the Prime Minister's office, you want a cash flow projection. One of my interns got elected in Italy. He's supposed to get them to. I can't, anybody got a cash flow projection? Guaranteed income? Have you seen one? All these conversations around the world are all this. It's cool to talk about it. Financials. Anyway, in here we showed that we could not make it work until about 2030, because if you take a look at as Salim very nicely did, our cost of living is going up, but it's going to bell curve back down. All right. You've got another curve of taxing robots and synthetic biology and all that. This is going to start going up. Where those two things cross over, we figure it's about 2030. Which is very nice, because if it is 2030, and if the earliest we think that general intelligence happens, that's when we're going to need it. So we might be lucky. Okay, so clearly we're going to be living in a world where all reality as we know it, and artificial reality and augmented reality sloshes all together, and we won't make a distinction. Like, for example, when I call you on the telephone, am I talking to you or a machine? We say, I'm talking to you. But I'm actually talking to a machine, talking to a machine, talking to a machine, which is talking to you. So we mentally accept that you and I are connected. Technologically augmented, but connected. We may have a conscious technology integration with the whole world as a human being. So the distinctions between physical reality and computer-generated reality won't matter anymore. As I mentioned, if you take organized crime, corruption, information warfare, and terrorism, it seems that these four things are increasingly overlapping. There's a global strategy in process of being evolved now to counter this sort of stuff at the moment, but to my knowledge, it's not in place yet. But we have to take this very seriously, just like we have to take very seriously the idea of superintelligence, as we've been warned about before. But scenario number 2 takes care of all those problems, so you can read that one later on. But it certainly makes democracy and free markets an illusion. This could all be controlled by these little interactions right here. Interesting. So, Salim, I'm getting the same deal you're getting there. Anyway, imagine your personal avatar that you talk to and gets to know you and your interests. He goes running around the internet all night long, wakes you up in the morning and says, I've found 75,000 things that you want to do today. I realize you can't do all 75,000, so I've already arranged some smart contracts for you. So we got down to 15 things. 7 you will actually want to do because it's cool to do it, there's no money. And the other 8, you'll make a fair amount of money today on this sort of stuff. So you're connecting to markets worldwide rather than local markets with your interests, so that you may actually be able to make a living out of being who you want to. I could, for example, if I had gotten my little Google Glass, but I didn't, but if I got my little Google Glass, I could have done a little computer thing before coming to Dubai saying, I'm going to come to Dubai. I'm going to be part of this little council on RTA, the Roads and Technology or Transportation Authority Committee for the Future. We're going to have a little meeting. I got to turn it off because I signed an agreement that I can't talk about it. But when I come back to this other meeting, I can turn it on. We can show you Dubai and all these interesting people. And by the way, I'll charge you €1 or $1 or something like that. Well, out of the whole world, maybe 100 people will sign up. Well, that takes care of a nice lunch tomorrow. But I didn't do anything that I wouldn't have done anyway. So it's a different slice on a marginal deal, but it's a similar thing. It doesn't cost me anything to be myself, but I'm just giving people access to myself in this sort of a world. Now, if we do augment intelligence, consider these 2 guys. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, 1991. Think of the world that they have created out of those 2 genius brains. So what happens if by 2030 or 2050 we have millions, conservatively speaking, are augmented geniuses? Imagine you're running a business where the average IQ is X, but then you imagine you're running a business where everybody is an augmented genius. Different implication for management. And these little experiments are already going on right now, the contact lenses for the internet connection and the rest of it. And you've probably heard that Bill Gates wants to put a little device inside your brain. So I'm up for the contact lenses instead of the brain. But it looks like this is inevitable in the same way that wearing glasses for guys like me are inevitable. So we go to a hierarchy of needs and go to a self-actualization economy because our basic needs are being met. You know, as it was pointed out, extreme poverty is going to be a thing of the past. So if you take a hierarchy of needs and you build it up, what's next? So we eventually have an economy based upon you self-actualizing yourself. And I'm getting the highlight to get my butt off this stage. So this will be available to you. We have a think tank that sort of works on all this sort of stuff worldwide. We ran some scenarios, or workshops on these scenarios, so that countries would come up with their own strategies. What do we do about all this sort of stuff? What's our plan? And so we came up with 93 actions. And when these studies were done, and I surveyed them before on the future of work and technology, they would usually recommend STEM education, science, technology, engineering education. Okay? That's one of 93 actions that we identified here, plus another 118 that we didn't assess yet. It's a complex transition. There's no silver bullet, but we have tons of silver bullets. There's no reason to be pessimistic, but there's no reason to go to sleep either, and we shouldn't settle on just 1 or 2 things. Because if you take STEM education in 2050 with a workforce of, say, 6 billion people, How many of the 6 billion people can really make a living in science and technology and engineering? Maybe 1 billion if we're lucky. What about the other 5 billion? That's why this other stuff's got to come into play. So we put it into the state of the future, and I wish you a lovely dinner, and I'll see you in a bit. Thank you.